I'm not as opinionated on them as the last one.
We'll get through it.
We'll see what happens. I guess before the never mind. I see we're now streaming.
Yes.
We'll just fuck it. We'll do it live.
We'll do it live. All right, everybody. Welcome to Fantasy Football's Finest. If you're new, welcome. Join us in the chat. Let us know what you're thinking. And if you're back again, thanks for being here. We appreciate you. I'm Mike, and we're joined today by Matt and Ted. How you guys doing?
Great.
So good.
Awesome. Connor, our fourth, he's running a little bit late, but he will be here as well shortly whenever that is, hopefully in about 20 minutes. But we're going to get started, get rolling along with, let's start with what we're drinking tonight. Matt, let's start with you. What do you got in the glass?
Okay. Well, it's in a can.
Okay.
This is, I got a
Even
mixed
better.
pack. Yeah, I got a mixed pack. It's my favorite way to enjoy beer. From Ninkasi Brewing, which is out in Eugene, Oregon.
Okay.
And so this is the Total Domination IPA. And so far, it's not dominating. Certainly not totally. But it is very delicious.
Very, very nice. How about you, Ted? What do you
got? This week, I am bringing it back to Cape May, which I think has got to be the brewery of the summer. This is the double IPA, the Coastal Evacuation. This is a clearer, I'll pour it out so you can take a look, double IPA. And incidentally, if we get to round two, I actually have the other one, the other Cape May double IPA. And I have to say that the two of them together have been a very delightful yin and yang kind of thing going on, where the orange one's very orange and big and juicy, where this one's a lot more pop forward and everything. And they're both fantastic, totally different flavors, but just so on point. Cape May is killing it. We also tried the cranberry shandy they have, and that's freaking awesome.
That sounds good.
So they're pumping out some good beer over there.
Yeah. Ted, I will say, if you don't get to round two, I will be thoroughly disappointed in you.
I'll be very surprised. Cape May is a fantastic brewery. We should get them to sponsor us.
They really are. I can't believe how much I like every one I've tasted. It's crazy.
Yeah. I haven't had that in a couple of years, so I should go back and revisit it. But
Mike,
I don't know if you guys have had this. I mean, I've just gotten into the whole seltzer type scenario thing. So I started off with Truly, and their stuff was pretty good. I liked it, but then I saw on the way out of the liquor store that they're doing lemonade hard seltzers, and I had posted in our group chat about this. But yeah, these things are freaking delicious. Comes in a black can, and it's the same thing as a cider, except it's got a little bit of stevia in it, so it's not like sugar or anything like that. It's all natural, and it's a pretty delicious carbonated lemonade. Love it.
So it's Mike's Hard Lemonade.
Essentially, yeah. But better. It's not overly sweet, which is really great. It's nice and tart.
Yeah, so it's not Zima.
Yeah, exactly. Zima.
There's an artificial tang in some seltzers that I don't like. You got to find the right brand that suits your taste buds.
I hate to admit that my favorite of the seltzers is White Claw.
Jeff would be proud.
I know I really don't want to, but I was surprised. I didn't think I liked any non-citrus flavors, but the black cherry and the raspberry from White Claw are actually pretty good.
Have you guys had the Oscar Blues seltzers?
They make them?
Sure,
I didn't know.
I'm sure you get them out there. There's a weird name for them. I'll look it up while I talk. But so they don't have that artificial tang, and they come in pretty unbelievable. I think they have 8 different varieties of flavors. Wild Basin, that's it.
Wild Basin, okay.
And that comes highly recommended by me.
Nice. All right. Well, it's something I will look at. I love Oscar Blues. I mean, Dale's Pale Ale was a staple for such a long time for me.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with it. So
big chunky IPA.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into some news. And the last 2 days for the NFL have just kind of it's back. I mean, the NFL is back, whether it's good or bad news, because there's been a lot of bad news for a lot of teams. But football's back. There's plenty of stuff to talk about. and we can kind of get into a couple different things here. Just few things that I just wanted to throw out there. You throw your quick opinions out. Both Cole Beasley and Vic Beasley, wide receiver and defensive end for the Titans, have skipped testing 2 days in a row and have had no communication with the Titans organization whatsoever. I find this a little alarming, considering that Cole Beasley has been a standout wide receiver in the league, and he looks to fit into that offense well. And Vic Beasley could be that. I mean, knowing Vic Beasley personally, he has the talent. It's just whether he puts it all together, and he's on a 1-year deal. So this is kind of alarming. It's like, hey, bud, do you want your money, and do you want a longer contract after this? Like, at least call the people, send a text message, say something.
Yeah, the only way that this is going to work, the only way that the NFL is going to be able to pull this off, is if there's accountability on behalf of the players to not only show up for these tests, but to be responsible when they're outside of team facilities. I mean, you heard the story about the basketball player who left the bubble in Orlando and went to a strip club for chicken wings. And regardless of how good the chicken wings were, and I heard they were excellent, that's just the kind of thing that's going to tear all of this down and like cause us to have no sports whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's been this list. It's called the Reserve/COVID-19 list, which a couple people are being put on, whether it's for COVID or some other thing that they're just basically not telling us why these people are on this list. But it's important to know that these guys are on here because they're missing the start of camp. And especially there are some rookies on there. Most notably, Justin Jefferson got put on there today, who we're all coveting as the Vikings' number 2 wide receiver. We actually made a post about this on Instagram at FFFinest365. Tajay Sharp was a free agent signed by the Vikings, and he's coming over from the Titans, and he easily jumps into that number 2 role. Also, Kenny Gallaudet, number 1 receiver for the Lions, got put on the reserve COVID-19 list. Now, for some of these veterans, it's okay because let's just say it is COVID, then 2 weeks in quarantine, they can come back, they can roll right in. But for some of these rookies, they already didn't have OTAs. They missed rookie mini camps and things like that. Now they're missing the start of actual training camp, even though there's not a lot of football within the first 20 days, no contact, things like that. It's still a huge hit for some of these guys.
Mike, what is the implication of being put onto the list? Like, and being that it's an IR, initially, I think that like that puts you out for, I don't know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks or something like that. Is it a 2-week sort of reserve list?
I don't know the details personally. I don't know if the NFL does. Like, this just could be a thing that, they can put you on there for 3 or 4 days and then take you off. But,
But then what would it do? What purpose would it serve?
I just think it's a way, because they cut down the roster from 93 to 80 at the start of training camp. So this is a way for them to bring in someone else while this person is in self-quarantine, for instance.
Okay.
Like the Falcons today, for instance, our fullback, he got put on the reserve COVID-19 list. So I think that you put him there. This frees up a roster spot potentially to bring in another fullback, just so you have someone to practice with.
Cool. So just roster management, really.
I think so.
This is from ESPN. It's being placed on the list doesn't mean the players have coronavirus. It's possible for a player to be placed on a list because they've been potentially exposed to it. And teams are not required to disclose the reason why a player is on the list, and they can be activated when they're healthy. So it seems like the discretion is left to the teams themselves.
Yeah. So I think what that says is whether the player has it or not, the teams are really doing their due diligence in being like, okay, well, you were in contact with this guy who is known to have COVID, 6-7 days ago. Let's ice you for right now. Let's see if anything transpires. We'll continue to test you. And if you're good, then you can come back to the team. But what the NFL is doing, they're seeing what happened to the Miami Marlins. And they're just like, no, we can't have that. And the NFL is smart. The NFLPA and the IRED or whatever it's called, they actually passed all 32 teams today, said all their precautions for COVID and the testing and everything like that is all good to go. So that's a good sign for the NFL.
I think what this list means is that Bill Belichick already has a loophole.
Yep. I don't know how. I don't know why. I don't know how it's going to
chalk
come
the Patriots in for the Super Bowl. It's fine.
Well, let's talk about the Patriots real quick, because they actually had 5 guys from their roster opt out of the season. 2 of their most notable players are defensive captain Dante Hightower and starting right tackle Marcus Cannon. Now, Marcus Cannon has been a very good right tackle for the Patriots, and Dante Hightower is a perennial, I don't want to say perennial Pro Bowler, but he's a very good middle linebacker. The Patriots are now, with that vaunted defense that they had last year, even though they kind of fizzled out towards the end of the season, that defense is now returning 0 linebackers from last season. Jamie Collins and Kyle Van Noy both left in free agency, and now Dante Hightower is not going to play in 2020. If there's anyone that can recover from this, it's Bill Belichick. He's always been next man up. But this also frees up a lot of cap space. So maybe you could see a guy like Clay Matthews come into the Patriots organization, who had a very good season last year until he got injured. And we all know the type of player he is, especially you, Matt. So do you think the Patriots can honestly recover from all these losses?
You're right. If any team can do it, it's the Patriots. And Clay Matthews would be a good fit because he can play outside or inside. He's just kind of a football player, which is the kind of guy that Bill Belichick gravitates toward. The Patriots also lost Patrick Chung, who opted out.
That's big.
So that's another critical piece of their defense. I don't know. Everybody kind of pegged the Patriots as in a rebuilding year this year. Maybe they're just committing to it, and then this is the grand plan to get Trevor Lawrence next year. Who knows?
God, I hope not. So
I don't think they'll be that bad, though.
Yeah, it's the Patriots.
It's Cam Newton, and
their floor is what, 7-9, which is respectable considering all that they've lost.
I would say 6-7 wins is their floor.
Yeah, which isn't bad. I'll take that. Like, not as a Patriots fan, I know that our in-house Patriot fan Rob would be completely devastated by that. It's Super Bowl or bust every year, pretty much, for the Patriots. But knowing as a football person, knowing what they lost and what they're going through, if they win 7 games, I think that's pretty magical. Just being honest.
Yeah, if they sneak into the playoffs, that would be a huge win for them.
Yeah, for sure.
Somewhat related news.
No.
My brother-in-law shared this news article from the Buffalo News. Unfortunately, it's about an obituary for Carol Scarcella. May she rest in peace. But in her obituary, the most important thing that she wanted everyone to know is that she hated Tom Brady. And
that's incredible.
that it warranted capital letters. The only 5 letters capitalized in a row. And it's just important to remember that this guy sucks, and so do the Patriots. 7-9 would be a magical year for me and everyone else in the NFL.
Yeah. I just think it's time to see someone else come out of the AFC East. The Buffalo Bills had a very good season last year. The Jets, with everything that kind of happened with Jamal Adams, they get a capable safety in return, plus a bevy of draft capital, with 2 first-round draft picks and a 3rd. I mean, that is just absolutely ridiculous. I think the Jets won out in that trade, but who knows?
I think I think it's already a win for NFL fans or any fan of any team that's not in the NFC East, because it's thrown into doubt now. It's at least competitive. Yes. Whereas in the past, it was a de facto championship for the Patriots, and I think they bore that out by winning it 13 years in a row or something. Whereas this year, there's at least some question marks. It's going to at least be competitive because the other teams got better and the Patriots got worse.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. I mean, they did draft that kid, that safety. I want to say he came out of Liberty. Can't remember his name, but I know he was pretty highly touted, coming from a Division II school.
Yep.
So who knows? He just takes the place of Chung, and boom, cheaper option right there. Tua passed his physical today, so he is cleared for all things football. Big news out of Miami. And his counterpart, not Fitzpatrick, but Joe Burrow, who he was compared to all draft. Zach Taylor actually comes out by saying, yeah, we feel pretty comfortable with Joe Burrow as our starting quarterback. No shit, dude. Why is this fucking news?
Yeah.
You drafted him number 1 overall, and then 3 days later you let Andy Dalton go. That's not news. He's obviously your starter. Who are you going to start? That kid Ryan, whatever his name is, from NC State, who played a game and a half. It's stupid. That's the dumbest news I've ever heard. Like, why did someone even bother writing an article about that?
Well, here we are talking about it. So
yeah, they win.
I would say that like maybe it's a vote of concern for Burrow's ability, but like, what have we seen so far? Like, what has possibly transpired? There hasn't been mini camps. There hasn't been OTAs. Like, what he's been Zooming, I guess, with the coach. But like, come on.
Yeah, this is going to be a pretty telling time. No contact for 20 days in training camp and only a max of 16 padded practices. So if NFL Films is looking for a good one of those, what are they called? Like those fumble reels, the follies. Yeah, like the bloopers, the follies, things like that. This is going to be a great year for that, because especially early on in the first couple of weeks before teams really kind of start to figure it out, it's going to be pretty wild. Damien Williams, running back, should have been the Super Bowl MVP, but I get that. He opted out today, as well as Giants starting left tackle Nate Solder, who I don't think will be missed in New York whatsoever.
Well, Damien Williams is kind of a big deal. I mean, that kind of bumps
Damien Williams definitely
of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, that's the thing that we've been sticking to in all these conversations about fantasy, is that, well, they still have Damien Williams, and he was still so great in the last game that the Chiefs played. But again, they have so much talent in Kansas City that they'll be able to buffer that loss pretty easily, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Feels like we're getting dangerously close to a replacement situation, or like a World War II Phil Pitt Steagles.
Yeah, it very, very well may. Who knows? Maybe Keanu Reeves steps onto the field and plays quarterback for a little bit here.
But really, like, I mean, the list isn't going to get shorter, right? The opt-out list, like maybe, but I just think it's going to get longer and longer, and these teams are going to stop looking like themselves.
Yeah. I think they have until, and I may be wrong on this. I don't know if one of you guys know. I think they have until the 31st.
August 3rd, I believe.
Okay. So anyway, like there's a deadline to opt out.
A couple more days.
And I think, like, I'm holding my breath that Aaron Rodgers doesn't opt out. Like, I think there's going to be one huge player to opt out that like changes the landscape for that team, and it's going to come in the next 2 to 3 days.
That would be such an Aaron Rodgers move too.
Oh, it totally would.
And Jordan Love's now just thrown into the fire.
You, Green Bay.
Yeah.
I don't think Aaron Rodgers would do it, considering the conversation that we may as well jump right into. So a clip came out from Kyle Brandt's podcast, top 10 questions or whatever with Kyle Brandt, as if these celebrities need more time on air. They get to drum up all this stuff. But regardless, Aaron Rodgers is on there. He asked him one simple question. He's like, hey, with the 26th pick in the NFL in the 2019-2020 NFL draft, the Green Bay Packers select quarterback Jordan Love, Utah State. And he's just like, well, I go over to my pantry, I pour myself 4 fingers of tequila, and that's it. And like, I
thought he was a Scotch guy.
That's what he said. He said, like, usually I go to Scotch, but like this news was so shocking. I only pour.
Let's be honest. 4 fingers of Scotch is
4 fingers of tequila.
That's true.
That's all of the shots that we plan on sharing as like a group of 12.
Yeah, it says a lot though. But he said it was mainly to deal with all the text messages and all the calls that he was going to get, which is understandable. That's a headache in itself. But he said he reached out to him the next day. He encouraged him. He's just like, hey, look, I've been in this situation before. So I just want to say, like, I know, I'm excited to work with you and whatever like that. He's saying all the right things. And Aaron Rodgers is such an outstanding quarterback. He always says the right things in front of the camera. Behind the scenes, I'm sure it's a little different. But I saw a great stat today. 16 years Bart Starr spent with the Green Bay Packers. 16 years Brett Favre spent with the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers is now heading into 16th season, I should say, with the Green Bay Packers. They drafted Jordan Love in the first round. So is Aaron out next year? Let's talk about that.
Okay. I have a lot of thoughts about this. I have so many thoughts and emotions and fears and worries.
Emotions.
Matt is a Packers fan, in case that's not clear.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, his helmet disappeared in the background, so
yeah.
He's just a Spider-Man fan now.
So one of the things that happens with Aaron Rodgers is that his quotes get taken out of context, and Aaron Rodgers is very careful about the words that he says. And so, like, as soon as like that leak of that interview came out, I saw on Fox News some story written about it that said, "This is Aaron Rodgers last year in Green Bay," and I'm like, well, no, he never said that. There's been no indication that that's the case. However,
Aaron Rodgers admits to alcoholism.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's right. He drinks 4 fingers of tequila every night. Like the biggest takeaway for me from that clip, and I think the full interview will air later when the podcast is released, is that Aaron Rodgers seems resolved to not finish his career with the Packers, whereas I think Packer fans were kind of holding out hope that something might work its way out. But he said in very plain terms that you don't move up in the draft and draft a quarterback if you don't have plans to start him at some point. And Kyle Brandt, who's an excellent football personality, asked him, what's the more likely scenario? Is it that the Packers get rid of Aaron Rodgers, which seems insane, or that they don't start their first round quarterback? And he said, well, it's the first one. I mean, that's the more likely scenario. And so as a Packer fan, like the feeling that I'm left with is kind of what Aaron Rodgers expressed, is I'm just bummed about it. It's like the end of an era. Packer fans under 35, which I am, have only known 2 quarterbacks, and they've brought a lot of joy and great times to Packer fans, and it's just a bummer that this can't resolve itself in a better way. That said, I also, like Aaron Rodgers, understand it. I understand why the Packers did it. I understand why they will probably move on to Jordan Love. It's just a bummer. Whether that happens next year or the year after, we'll see. I think it makes more sense for the Packers contract-wise to do it in 2 years. But Aaron Rodgers isn't the kind of guy who's going to want to play a year when he knows that they're just going to cut ties with them the next year.
Yeah. This might not be. I'm just basing this on my own memories, but I'm trying to think of like a scenario where the quarterback at the current helm who's been there for 12 years or whatever, Aaron Rodgers has been the starter, like was resolved on moving on. And it's almost kind of relieving that he is, like, to have that Peyton Manning on the Broncos chapter, or like it would be kind of cool, especially if it were like kind of less I'm being forced out and more like I understand that this is my path, this is my journey, and like, let's go give another franchise 4 years of probably really awesome Aaron Rodgers years, while the Packers do the thing that they've been planning to do that I was a part of, like this whole thing. Like Brett Favre is a great example of another one who it was sort of under duress that he left it all. But like, just to sort of like, they might be able to come into a better agreement. It won't be necessarily to a rival. Like, it could, if we all just, just pretended like it was a business and like to try to take the emotion of being the quarterback for 15 years out of it, like, can you move on and like have a successful second chapter where like everyone's okay and like it's not bad blood? And
we'll see. It's going to be up to Rodgers, because the Packers traded Favre to the Jets. And then Favre said, nope, fuck that. I'm going to the Vikings. And I'm going to kick the Packers' ass for 1 year.
And then he ended up playing for the Jets.
Yeah, I guess Peyton was maybe a little bit more amicable than I'm remembering it.
Yeah, Peyton and Tom Brady and Joe Montana all seem to
Brady's
to do it the right way. I mean, Favre was just like, Favre is a drama queen and Rodgers is a drama queen, and the Packers did it in the worst way possible. So it was just like, there was no way that wasn't going to be like this huge dramatic explosion. But
and is Aaron Rodgers as old as Favre was when?
Yeah, same age.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's different because, I mean, Favre had been talking about retirement for the past 3 years. And even
missing camp, coming in late.
And even though he came off a great year, they went to the NFC Championship game and probably should have beaten the Giants at Lambeau in that freezing cold game. Even though he's coming off that great year, I think a lot of people expected, okay, this is the farewell for Brett. And then he did retire. And then he just showed up at Packers training camp. It's a melodrama. It was a soap opera. And I think I love Brett Favre. But I think he probably wanted it that way because that's been his MO his whole career. He's a showman.
Yeah. I gotta say, I actually think this is really great. As much as I love the history and the loyalty that Aaron Rodgers has to Green Bay, I think this really gives, like, for people who are fans of the game, like, Brett Favre is my all-time favorite player. I love Brett Favre. He is not only a great football player, but he's an awesome character, and he's a great football. Like, if you listen to that guy on Mic'd Up, the way that he interacts with his teammates, the referees, and the coaches, there is no way that you just don't love the guy, and you don't, like, no homo, but you don't just fall in love with him and, like, his persona and everything like that.
Full homo with me. I love Brett Favre.
Yeah, I love Brett Favre.
Yeah.
But it's just like those scenarios where he left and played with Minnesota, like, I'm actually very thankful for when he was on Minnesota. One of the best games, one of the most memorable. Yeah. Jesus. Gin. One of the most memorable games is Bountygate. I thought Brett Favre played such a hell of a game that time, and he just got his ass kicked the entire time. And can't remember the name of the coach, but
Greg
he was
Williams.
just no.
Brett Childress.
Yes, God, he was such a terrible coach with his little telemarketer headset. I couldn't stand that guy. But and then Brett went to the Jets, which I actually got to see Brett Favre play, which I had never been able to do. I watched him throw 6 touchdowns as a Jets against the Cardinals, and then watch Anquan Boldin get his jaw broken by Kenny Rhodes in the end zone in that game, which was pretty exciting. But it's things like this that give football fans, like, now some other team is going to be able to watch Aaron Rodgers, some team who has had quarterback woes for years and years. They're like, wow, Aaron Rodgers is on our team. We get to watch him. I think that's pretty cool. And I think one of the coolest things that Kyle Brandt said at the end of the interview, he's like, when you're drinking your tequila at the end of the night and you're laying in bed and you're closing your eyes and you're waking up and you just think, man, don't quote me here because I'm probably going to butcher this. He's like, man, I wonder how good I look in a Bears uniform. And, Aaron was kind of taken back and he was laughing, but I think that's pretty funny because Brett left, went to Minnesota, division rival. And the Chicago's had quarterback woes for years.
Well,
so
Mike, it sucked. Brett Favre on the Vikings. That sucked. It was the worst. It was the worst 2 years of my football fandom. Because here's this guy who is Mr. Packer, who is my childhood idol, playing for the team's biggest rival, and it sucked. And it would be
and he was still good.
And he was still good. He was still so good, and he was motivated to kick the shit out of the Packers. It would be tough to see Rodgers on a different team. It would be impossible to do it all over again, to see him on an NFC North team. Kirk Cousins, maybe in 2 years they move on and he goes back to Minnesota, or Rodgers goes to Minnesota, or he goes to Chicago, or Matt Stafford's back finally breaks completely and he goes to Detroit. None of those would be excellent scenarios.
Do you imagine Aaron Rodgers throwing to Kenny Gallaudet and Marvin Jones with a emerging TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift?
No, I can't. The final thing I'll say about it is that, like, in classic Aaron Rodgers style, he throws in like a veiled barb, like a read between the lines kind of comment, where he says young GMs and coaches tend to want to start their guys, and that's just a shot at Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst.
Yep.
It's totally true, and I don't blame Matt LaFleur or Brian Gutekunst for wanting to do that, but that's just Rodgers' way of saying fuck you without saying fuck you.
Exactly. And he wanted a wide receiver. If you watch the clip, it's a 6-minute clip. I recommend it to whoever's watching this. Go watch it. It's actually really great because Aaron Rodgers is such a student of the game. He's out there. He's calling out these guys. He's like, hey, look, the kid from Clemson was there. He would have been really nice. Also, the kid from Arizona State, referring to Brandon Ayuk, and then T. Higgins from Clemson. And even Justin Jefferson, he throws out there. He's like, hey, look, all these guys would have been great. And now the real kick in the ass is Devin Funchess signs a 1-year contract with the team, which would be great. take some pressure off of Devontae Adams, and he opts out. So they're back to square one.
Is Aaron Rodgers vocal about wanting a career in the front office or coaching or anything like that?
He
seems like
knowledge.
He seems like that, cut from that cloth. Like I don't see him in the booth like Tony Romo style. I see him as a quarterback's coach that moves immediately to offensive coordinator.
Yeah,
or something like that.
He certainly
I don't know
got
if
the
he would
brains
want to do that, but
yeah.
Well, I mean, he's
right,
he's self-scouting and scouting. Like
he does.
He's running that team
sports
in a lot of ways, and he likes challenging the head coach. It just seems like a guy that like kind of wants that like kind of complete control, and he might have the opportunity to do it.
He bought a share of the Bucks, so he's interested in ownership. I mean, that might be. He has a ton of money. So
when Aaron Rodgers is the coach of Tom Brady, I quit. I quit football.
Yeah, that very well could happen at the pace that Tom Brady is going, but God, I hope not. Let's talk about the top 100 real quick, which the format, I believe they started it last year in the sense that they're just kind of doing episodes like real quick. When they first started doing it, it was kind of a weekly thing, which I preferred because if I missed it one week, I had a chance to kind of be able to catch up. And I actually missed it on Sunday. And then I'm just like, holy shit, they went through 30 players in one night. And now the list is done. And it's been 4 days. I'm a little pissed off. I like it more as a weekly release. It's kind of like Hard Knocks. It's something to look forward to, which I don't like all these Netflix things where it's just like binge. Like I like having something to look forward to. But regardless, some big names. Julio Jones, I'll just throw it out there. 6 consecutive years as a top 15 finish, which I think is pretty good. And I want to give notice to Larry Fitzgerald, who has been on this list every year that they started doing it. And he had a pretty good season last year, nearly 900 yards, couple touchdowns. And
it speaks to the respect that he has among other players in the league because the players vote on this. So.
Yeah. And one thing I definitely want to mention when it comes to this list, I don't want to label it a popularity contest because it is, but it isn't. But it's also people, like I know in the Falcons community, a lot of people were upset like, oh, Matt Ryan didn't make the list. I'll tell you right now, you guys both know I'm a huge Falcons fan. I'm a big Matt Ryan supporter. Matt Ryan and the Falcons played like shit last year, right? I think Matt Ryan is a top 10 quarterback in the league, but when it comes to his performance in 2019, it was dog shit. The whole Falcons team played like dog shit. I'm surprised we had 2 players actually make the list, which was pretty exciting. But this is all based on last year.
That's a good thing for the integrity of the list.
Yeah.
Like 100%. Like you don't want, Matt Ryan's on it because he was MVP a couple of years ago, and now like we just don't ever drop him. We feel scared to let Larry Fitzgerald off the list or whatever. Like because I think Fitzgerald is probably a little bit of a career play, but I mean he also had a good year last year, and
season.
like and part of it catches. And if it is other players voting, if there could be something to be said about being a vocal leader in the locker room. Like I know that like that plays into a lot of players standing with their team, and like the Steelers that are on the list are oftentimes fit into that category. It's like who really stepped up and like ran the defense this year. Like that's the guy who's going to be the highest ranked. This year was actually an exception in that it was, I think Minka was the highest defensive player, but
actually only TJ, 2 Steelers that I know, or no, 3 with TJ Watt, Minka, and Cameron Hayward made the list. Yeah.
Right.
Which Cameron Hayward, by the way, is way too low for the type of player that he is.
Absolutely.
Very
and he is that defensive leader. He's the veteran leader of that locker room. So but also like top 100 last year, he had a good year, but it wasn't his best year. And I think TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick had better years, and I think that they're rated higher. So good on them. But
like the beauty of the list, and I also have mixed feelings about the list, is that like it's not only based on stats and fans' perceptions. Larry Fitzgerald may not have like this great statistical year, but he could still be a bitch to play against, right? He can still catch everything like over you. And if all the corners who ever played Larry Fitzgerald last year had the same experience, they're all going to vote for him as one of the top players in the league.
Yeah. To kind of touch on Larry Fitzgerald here for a minute and at least get some fantasy into this conversation. I actually really like Larry Fitzgerald as a fantasy wide receiver this year, especially as a sleeper candidate, because what did the Cardinals do in the offseason? They brought in DeAndre Hopkins, who's going to draw a lot of double coverage, which means that you're not going to double Larry? Even at 36, 37 years old, whatever he is at the start of the season, I will take Larry one-on-one against any corner in the league. I don't care who it is. His catch radius and his hands, he didn't drop one pass last year. And that's in a new offensive system with a rookie quarterback. That isn't, clap it up. Clap it up for Larry Fitzgerald.
It's honestly been so obvious on tape that he's got incredible hands, and like that stat just like puts a button on it. And to your point, like we did an 8-round mock draft, 10 team for our league, and Larry wasn't even in the conversation. So you're grabbing him in like the 10th round, the 12th round, and like you want to talk about a floor player, Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, what's his floor? 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. I'll take that.
Like consistently across, like it's not going to be a boom game. It's just going to be like 60 yards and 7 catches, and you're like, okay,
I'll take it.
Not bad for wide receiver 3.
Yeah. If he's on your bench, you're going to play him for 2 or 3 weeks in a row at some point, and you're going to plug him in for bye weeks and stuff because he is that steady. He is that steady producer.
Yeah, you just have to love him. And one thing that I actually found out, I'm not all into career statistics and everything like that. I believe it's something like 172 receptions that he's behind for Jerry Rice for the all-time. Yeah. I mean, realistically, he could turn that in 2 seasons. So this year and next year, which I think he can definitely do. I would love to see him get that record, because if there's anyone deserving in this generation of breaking Jerry's record, it's 100% Larry Fitzgerald.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. And he can produce at that age too. I mean, look at Adrian Peterson. These guys who have superhuman talents can play beyond like the mean of when people at their position retire. And Larry Fitzgerald is one of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Gil Brandt, longtime scout, Hall of Famer for the Cowboys. He's been writing for NFL.com for a while now. Gil, if you're watching this, and I know you are, you and I are going to have some words, but he actually ranked the last 10 MVPs. He put Matt Ryan as number 10, despite having the second highest quarterback passer rating, second highest in yards, third most in touchdowns, but that's besides the point. What I want to get to is, you brought up Adrian Peterson. He listed Adrian Peterson's MVP season in 2012 as number 1, which I agree with 100%. And I honestly, I hate that the MVP has turned into quarterbacks.
Yeah.
It does such a disservice to all the other players in the NFL. And I get it. Quarterbacks are marketable. They're getting the commercials and all this other stuff. And they're the highest paid players on the team. But look, what Lamar did this year and what Mahomes did prior, magical, right? They're well deserving. But how is Christian McCaffrey not in the mix, right? Yeah. 2 of the biggest snubs in recent memory have been the fact that Christian McCaffrey did not win the Heisman at Stanford, and that he didn't win the MVP. I mean, the guy, Roger Craig, had this record since 1982, 1983, whatever it was, I forget, of 1,000 yards and 1,000 yards. So Christian McCaffrey was the first guy to do it on a shit fucking football team. So how does he not really get into that MVP category? They wouldn't have won a single game if it wasn't for Christian McCaffrey.
Yep. I think you have to, I mean, on the one hand, the NFL has become so quarterback centric, and it places such an emphasis on that position, and it's still really hard to play that position. So if you can do it well and you can have like this exceptional season, like Mahomes and Rodgers and Jackson and Tom Brady have had, then yeah, I mean, it's the most important position in sports. They excelled at it more than anybody else at that position. Give them that. But you also have to look at the relativity of it. A season like Christian McCaffrey compared to other running backs is that gap is so much greater between him and number 2, as opposed to Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, or you can go back through the years. I think quarterbacks are always going to be the highest performers, always the most valuable players on their teams, typically. And so I think you're right that when you have a running back that can produce as well as Christian McCaffrey, I think you have to give that more weight. You have to give it more credence.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the same conversation as the Super Bowl MVP with Damien Williams, like, and it's just going to go to Pat Mahomes because, like, it would take. I don't know what better game you could have out of a guy that would earn it. Though I am, as you know, as the resident Steelers fan, I am not sold on Lamar Jackson forever as a solution, but I will say that, like, as much as I don't like quarterbacks winning it, what he did to the team this year, the way that he, like, transcended all defenses and, like, made people look slow, like Michael Vick in olden days, but, like, even better somehow. Like, this might be the one year where I'm like, I have to hand it to him. Like, Christian McCaffrey had a really great year, but, like, Lamar Jackson won 14 games. And that also maybe should, like, weighs into it somehow. Like, I know it's like, it's a team sport and the defense and blah, blah, blah. But, like, I think Jackson more so this year than maybe Mahomes the year before, as far as like really changing the complexion of how a team plays defense against you. Like, so I have to say he was
the MVP. For sure. So we actually got the final 10 right now. I'll just rattle them off to you real quick. So at 10, Derrick Henry, it's good. 9, Stephon Gilmore. DeAndre Hopkins comes in at number 8. Kittle at 7. Little surprised that he was over Kelsey in this list. Christian McCaffrey comes in at 6. Michael Thomas at number 5. I think that's well-deserved, even though I hate the Saints. Mahomes comes in at number 4. Aaron Donald at number 3. Lamar did get number 1, but I'm not seeing who got number 2.
McCaffrey?
No, McCaffrey was 6. 6. So who am I missing here?
I think Derrick Henry at 10 is a snub in of itself. Like, that is, he was another one where, like, that offense doesn't click without him, and he really did have that transcendent year. And again, similar with Jackson, am I a believer forever? No, like, I think that's sort of like that's gonna be his peak year, and it's hard to repeat that. I expect it's large
gonna be hard to repeat.
But like, that's what this award is supposed to, like, capture, in my opinion, is like that transcendent sort of year. And that, like, and I guess I sound like an idiot because, like, that's exactly the counter argument against Christian McCaffrey too. But
not at all. Let's talk about 2019, because now that I'm kind of thinking about it, 2019, the 100th year of the NFL, it was such a magical season when you think about it. We had one of the better Super Bowls. I mean, we've had some pretty good Super Bowls over the year, but we had a very good Super Bowl. We also had one of the Patriots defense was amazing as far as their turnovers and as far as a fantasy perspective. Derrick Henry just starts running over everybody, right? You have Michael Thomas break the reception record, which has been since the late 90s, early 2000s with Marvin Harrison. Christian McCaffrey goes for 1K, which is pretty solid. And you have Lamar Jackson have this outstanding season. Like, the level of play that we got from football this past season in the 100th year is pretty spectacular when you think about it in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, and in ways you wouldn't expect. Like you said, like Derrick Henry running the ball out of the backfield
in an old school offense. I think is great.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, you have Michael Thomas, like, who's like catching the Drew Brees offense passes constantly, and Teddy Bridgewater, I guess, for a bunch of games. Like, and then Aaron Donald just like wrecking the pocket all the time. It's like, that's good football across the board, as far as I'm concerned.
It shows the durability of the sport, that, you know, the 49ers, who are a run first team, just trampled the NFC. And Derrick Henry beat the Patriots and the Ravens, the two favorites outside of the Chiefs, I guess, to win that conference. And all the best teams are built with a really strong offensive line and defensive line. Those are like core football tenets that probably go back to 1919.
For sure. All right, so we're kind of talking about the top NFL players. So let's kind of transition this into, you know, the two reigning MVPs. You have Patrick Mahomes, who is clearly more of your traditional drop back passer, who has some, I would say, Russell Wilson type running capabilities. And then you have Lamar Jackson, who, yeah, I know I was
yeah, I'm gonna say
there.
no on that one. He's like almost like a shifty, like he's not like a statue like Brady, but like he's more of a shifty in the pocket than he is a takeoff from him. Or Wilson's a straight up like steal the base kind of guy.
I was watching some Mahomes clips earlier, and he runs a lot like Rodgers. He's kind of slow, but he's shifty, and he can get outside the pocket, and he's always
Rodgers
looking to throw. And they like. I was surprised. Like Rodgers, I think, is more athletic than you think, and Mahomes is less athletic than I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway,
but he's smart. He comes from a baseball background, so he knows when to slide, and he's great at throwing off balance, which I think is phenomenal. All right, so you have Patrick Mahomes, who's more of a traditional drop back passer, and then you have Lamar Jackson, who is kind of this. I don't want to call it a fad quarterback, but traditionally, mobile quarterbacks have not transitioned well over time in the NFL. So let's kind of take that into consideration. If you're drafting and you're not for fantasy, for real football, you're starting a franchise. And these are the two of the youngest, hottest quarterbacks in the league. Obviously, it's a quarterback-driven league. So who are you starting off with? Would you rather have Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson? And Ted, we'll start off with you. What do you think?
I am a fan of the pure pocket passer, and I just like in all of the football experience that I have, like whether it's on the field or just watching much, but it's enough. Scrambling quarterbacks are a pain in the butt to deal with. They you never know like what's going to happen on any given play, and that gives you an advantage that's really hard to quantify. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, like the chess game is won with a pocket passer. And so far there have been greats that have won it with their legs to some extent, but like even still, like, I mean, you make comparisons. I think Russell Wilson is a good comparison for Pat Mahomes and his ability to throw off balance and make those like freak baseball sidearm kind of passes and like make something out of nothing. And I like those are the two that come to mind that were like sort of like put on a pedestal for a scrambling ability, but at the end of the day, it was like their ability to throw the ball, to launch the ball on target 35 yards down the field on the sideline that like got them over the top. And I until I'm proven wrong, and it's injuries. Like I always get worried about that, and like knowing how to slide is big, but like you're just taking more hits, and you're maybe not looking for your fourth and fifth read, like we were saying with Brady and in our past conversations. It's like he's rocketing the ball in there because he's looked at every option he has. And if your third option is run, then you might be missing out on an opportunity potentially to give someone else's legs, the exercise and like you're not getting worn down just throughout the game and all that. So I'll take the pocket passer. I'll take Mahomes.
Absolutely. I would like to take this time to congratulate Connor on not getting caught while robbing a bank. Let's hear it for Connor, guys.
Hey guys, I just want to, thank everybody, thank the team, family and everything. I appreciate it.
Connor, it is 90 degrees outside and you're wearing a beanie. Let's talk about that real quick.
I didn't know the Bouncing Souls were playing tonight.
I work in a place where it's super fucking cold. So I literally got out of my car, let my dog out, and cracked a beer, and I am in front of a computer screen now. So
all right, Connor, we appreciate you getting here. We know it was a late night for you, so cheers and welcome to the conversation.
Appreciate it.
And what's in the glass or the
so these are freebies from work, but it's a BJ's Hopstorm IPA, not BJ's the wholesale club, BJ's restaurant apparently in Texas. Anyway,
cool. BJ's out here.
It's nice. Okay. Yeah. It's a chain, I guess. All right. Well,
sounds cool.
But it's good. It's good.
It's okay.
Does the cast and crew of Deadliest Catch know that you're missing, Connor?
Yeah. It's actually wicked tuna. All right. I know what you are, Matt, and you're snarky and wow, and also very clean shaven. I don't know what it's almost like looking at a bald Rocky. So I don't know what. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway,
sounds about right.
So, Mike, wow, that's a nice microphone. I feel
thanks.
Totally
I got it just for you, Connor. So
it's been hanging out in the corner.
I haven't seen it in the shot. Like, okay, very nice.
I'm going with a different angle on the camera today to kind of show off the finer size of my face. So
beautiful.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back into this Mahomes Jackson thing.
Yeah.
You don't want
By
to
the
talk
way,
about
sorry,
microphones
real
anymore?
quick. Russell Wilson was number 2, just to throw that out there, which I
Got
think
it.
is well deserved.
Yeah.
But still kind of a surprise.
Yeah, that seems again for like we were talking about like isolating last year. Like I don't know that I would have put him at 2.
His offensive line was terrible, and like he single-handedly got them to the playoffs,
Yeah,
the divisional round.
Yeah. So, all right, Matt,
Okay,
you're up. You
Well,
got.
I think it
Mahomes or
depends
Jackson?
on I think it depends on what kind of offense you want to run, right? I think that's the Ravens found the perfect way to utilize Lamar Jackson. And Patrick Mahomes, the last thing I would call him is a system quarterback because he has so much talent and can probably operate in a lot of systems, but he really thrives in Andy Reid's system. And he understands it well. And those guys are just synergistic right now in running that offense.
Sorry.
So first of all, I think it depends on what kind of offense you want to run. That said, I watched a lot of tape of Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes in preparation for this. And Patrick Mahomes is a pure passer. He can operate in multiple different offenses. Lamar Jackson is just kind of a chucker. I was surprised at how many times he just kind of slung the ball deep, and Marquise Brown would run under it and catch it. Now, Lamar Jackson is a remarkably good deep ball passer. Like he throws it with velocity. He throws it usually on the money. But how sustainable is that? I think we found out in that Titans game in the playoffs that, I kind of reject the idea that like teams just uncover a blueprint against a team or a player. But I do think that there's a lot to learn from that. The Ravens are a run-first offense, whether that's running through Mark Ingram or now J.K. Dobbins or running the read option with Lamar Jackson. And that sets up all those deep passes that Lamar Jackson throws. And it also sets up all those like crossing routes that Mark Andrews is catching over the middle. Mark Andrews, by the way, I watched the clips of all the Ravens game last year. Mark Andrews just jumps off the tape. And I know, Ted, you've mentioned him and you had him last year on your fantasy team.
I drafted him.
That's right. But that guy is just skyrocketing up my tight end board because he's
very
everywhere.
low consistency rating though.
Just X him out. There's no way he's hitting left.
Yeah, right.
That means Teddy's keeping him. Okay,
oh, first keeper drop.
Yeah. But so if we look at that Titans game, what did the Titans do? They rushed 4 all the time, and the Titans had a pretty good defensive line to be able to do that. And they always had a spy, and they changed who that spy was. Sometimes it was Keith Byard, sometimes it was Kenny Vaccaro, who I think is in some legal trouble now or something, and may not be able to play.
Domestic thing.
Yeah,
I think
one of those things. But they always put a spy on him, and they forced Lamar Jackson basically to throw. And then by virtue of the Titans offense running with Derrick Henry controlling the clock, getting up a lot of points, it only exacerbated that. So Lamar Jackson was forced to throw more and more. And he can make throws in tight windows, but he can't do it consistently. And so that's the big. Whereas Patrick Mahomes can do that and has done that. So from an NFL perspective, if I'm starting a team, it's Pat Mahomes because of the consistency. But just to dip into fantasy real quick, even though that Titans game, Lamar Jackson didn't win it, they didn't score a ton of points. He had 365 yards passing and 143 yards rushing. That would have been 37 points. So don't let any of this skew your view of him from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah. I think Lamar Jackson is an unbelievable talent. I think he's taken things that Michael Vick did, and I think he's actually more along the lines of he is the perfect child of a Randall Cunningham and Mike Vick. He's got the elusiveness and the speed that Vick had, but he's got the throwing capabilities that Randall Cunningham had. Our good friend Andrew actually brings up a good point in the chat here. He says that Ravens offensive coordinator is Greg Roman, which we know. And he was successful with another quarterback that Andrew has refused to name under a different Harbaugh. Also, a quarterback that we love on the channel here, Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo. And he asks, do you think much like Kaepernick's year, he did name him, sorry, defenses figure out Lamar? And we've talked about this a little bit, and I really think they do. When you look at the second year offense under Greg Roman, people start to figure him out, and you start to see a huge decline in the offensive production. A lot of them have good years, but it's still typically about a 20% reduction in production that following year. But when asked this question, if I'm taking Lamar, Matt, did you say definitively who you would take?
If I'm starting an NFL team, I would take Mahomes.
Mahomes. Okay. I would tend to agree with that sentiment. Although I like Lamar Jackson, I just don't think it's sustainable in the NFL. We talked about this with Cam last week. You run the ball 600 yards.
Franchise, if you're building an NFL franchise, but what if you're building, your fantasy franchise? Are you drafting
fantasy franchise? I'm taking Lamar Jackson, but if I'm starting a football team, I'm taking Patrick Mahomes, and I'm building around him. And it's honestly kind of remarkable because Andy Reid has always been known as this West Coast offense, which is short, quick passes, slants, bubble screens, things like that. But now you see that really transition to deep downfield passing, which he hasn't really done a lot of since his time in Philadelphia with Donovan McNabb and Michael Vick when he was there. But when he had guys like Alex Smith, and it was all short dink and dunk stuff. But Patrick Mahomes has transcended the NFL hierarchy. He's such a phenomenal talent. Everything that he can do with his arm and his legs. He reminds me a lot of Dan Marino. Dan Marino was a statue in a sense, but when you see him move around in the pocket, he actually avoided sacks very well, and he knew when to step up and when to roll out, and he threw very well on the run. But I think the clear answer, just as far as longevity and history, will back us all up on this. It's Patrick Mahomes. You want a traditional drop back passer who can deliver the football, who is not reliant upon his legs.
Yeah, but Lamar Jackson got better from year 1 to year 2. And why? And I think he surprised a lot of people with his passing ability. Why don't we view him as having a Michael Vick like trajectory, who outside of the dog fighting thing played for a lot of good seasons, probably had 10 good seasons in the league.
Dogfighting thing notwithstanding, he played again. So and was still able to produce for me. And again, this is to be frank, I haven't watched every Lamar Jackson throw YouTube video yet, but I did watch the Ravens, and I mean certainly against the Steelers and several other times. They're a fascinating team. They were winning a lot. And I was trying to figure out Lamar Jackson. There's the one throw I don't see him make is the fastball, which is kind of what we were saying about Tom Brady. And we're saying that Cam Newton's got it if he can make it happen. I think Jackson's got an incredible deep touch pass, but the rocketing it into that window pass, Vic was good at that.
Mm-hmm.
He had a
frozen rope.
A frozen rope style throw where it would just and that's an essential throw. You have to be able to make all of the throws to be an effective quarterback, because otherwise the teams, because that's the sort of thing a defense can figure out and know that that throw's not going to happen. If he's not proven that it's going to make that 25-yard laser, then the safeties do float back a little bit. Those guys are playing the guy. They're not playing the game. They're playing the quarterback, and they're damn good at it. So
I'm really glad you brought that up, Ted, because it's kind of like Nick Foles. Nick Foles has thrown all these good passes where he just lofts it up there. And when you see all of Lamar Jackson's passes, that's exactly what it is. Right. It's a high arcing loft pass. Yeah, it looks great, very especially when you're using the play action. But have you ever seen, and I don't know, maybe all the Lamar Jackson experts out there can let us know about this, but I'm talking about a 15-yard out where that corner is on tight man-to-man coverage and you have to throw it into the outside shoulder. I have not seen that out of Lamar Jackson, and I don't know if we ever will see it out of Lamar Jackson.
He can do it. He can do it at times. He just can't do it consistently. He reminds me of Jay Cutler. In Jay Cutler's best years, he was a gunslinger. He could throw the ball into anybody. It's just every time you played the Bears or the Broncos, you knew there was going to be 3 times when Jay Cutler was going to do that, and he was going to give the ball over and he was going to lose the game for them. I think Lamar Jackson right now, and Lamar Jackson's only in his 3rd year.
Yep.
Lamar Jackson right now is that. Now the question is, can Lamar Jackson progress? Why not? He's still a really young player. So if you're bullish on Jackson and think that he can progress, then yeah, build your team around him. But there's certainly like I don't know how well you can teach that at this point in a guy's career to be able to make that kind of throw, have the confidence to make that kind of throw, and be able to do it on a consistent basis.
Well, wait, if you're telling me I could have a young Jay Cutler with the best wheels in the league,
yeah, I mean,
I'd probably sign up for that.
I mean, you have to take the chance that he's going to throw a pick at like the worst possible.
Because receivers
time.
become way more open if you have a threat to, instead of stumble down the field, light it up and tear it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what Jackson was last year, and that's why they were 14-2, and they stumbled in the playoffs, whatever. They ran into a buzzsaw with the Titans. But that's what he was last year, and he can only go up from now. Like his stats may take a regression, but like his ability to build skill and like build his throwing ability can only go up at this point. I mean, that was the reason why
I disagree with that.
Well, that's the reason why he was the 5th quarterback taken in that draft of Sam Darnold and Josh Allen and Josh Rosen, who's nowhere, and Baker Mayfield, who sucks. Lamar Jackson was the last one taken because people said he couldn't throw. And then last year he threw for over, I think, 4,000 yards.
Yeah. True. But I honestly think he's peaked. I don't think he has a better season than the one that he had this past year at all through the course of his career. I mean, we've seen this. We've talked about Greg Roman and his style of offense. Once people figure Greg Roman out, that's it. We saw it in Buffalo. We saw it in San Francisco. Once people figure Greg Roman out, that's kind of it. And then Greg Roman moves somewhere else, and then it takes him a couple years to figure out something new and to do that. Now, granted, he's never had as much talent at the quarterback position as he has with Lamar Jackson. Sorry, Andrew. But Colin Kaepernick could not do the same things that Lamar Jackson can do. Tyrod Taylor cannot do the same things that Lamar Jackson can do. Lamar Jackson.
Wait, are you saying he reinvents
talent.
his offense everywhere he goes, though? Like, is that what Greg Roman's doing? Is like, why do people need? Okay,
little ripples here and there to different formations and things like that, because people figure out Greg Roman. It takes him about a year and a half to really catch up to him. And despite Lamar Jackson going off for over 400 yards in the playoff game, it was still a pretty dismal performance as far as turnovers goes. He had 2 interceptions, and I believe he had 3 fumbles that game. 2 fumbles that game. I think it was 3 fumbles against the Chargers the year before, whatever it may have been. But the thing about Greg Roman, I think he's fantastic for about a year and a half. And then people figure him out. He doesn't do enough as far as continual innovation, which is what you need. If you have a complete stable at offense, like a Josh McDaniels, where your system just works time in and time out because you're not a one-trick pony like Greg Roman is, where he kind of focuses on that mobile quarterback, the RPO, things like that, it gives you plenty of options. But if you're so focused on the mobile quarterback and the opportunities that affords your offense, then you're going to fail eventually because people figure it out.
Yeah, but Mike, you're assuming in your premise that people can figure out Lamar Jackson's 4.4 speed. After he gets 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, people can't tackle him. He is so fast and so elusive. So whether the play breaks down and he runs, or they design that run, you can't plan for that. And then if you pair that with the ability to throw a deep ball on a dime, and then you add in a guy like Hollywood Brown, and then you have a guy like Mark Andrews who can make any kind of contested catch, then like that is really difficult to scheme for. Yes, the Titans figured it out, but as we all know, like teams just kind of like in every football game, everything is different, right? Like you can just like, you could be amped up that game. You could have the perfect game plan that game. Lamar Jackson could be feeling shitty that game or whatever. Like every game is its own capsule. So it's hard to take like, to just say what the Titans did and then just like, and then say that the Bengals can also stop Lamar Jackson from running for 150 yards. in the future. And then on top of that, they have Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins, who are two of the and Mark Ingram, who's an excellent running back, and J.K. Dobbins, who could be an All-Pro.
And a great offensive line.
Right. And so there are pieces around Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson has some intangibles that you just can't plan for. And so, yeah, if the Ravens were to come out this year and do the exact same thing that they did last year, they're probably not gonna do as well. But if you have any faith that John Harbaugh is going to have any influence on Greg Roman, and Lamar Jackson is going to develop in any way, which I think he will, then it's just going to be a better version of Lamar Jackson and that Ravens offense.
Could be that this is finally the quarterback that the offense was designed for. I guess you can't have a better. You could arguably say Russell Wilson or Mahomes are better than Lamar Jackson, but I mean, as far as the quarterbacks he's had in the past, this would probably be the best kind of situation he's had so far for the implementation of his offense using the prototypical kind of RPO guy. I mean, as far as having wheels, that dude opens a lot of things up, and perhaps.
Things go in cycles. I mean, people figured out Mike McCarthy's offense. The Packers won the Super Bowl. They went 15-1, and then they figured it out, right? People figured out Sean McVay's offense. People might figure out Kyle Shanahan's offense next year. I think, Mike, you made a point a couple episodes ago that Shanahan hasn't been in the same place for more than 2 or 3 seasons or something, so he hasn't had the opportunity to show that offense the same set of opponents. So it's very possible that people figure that out. The only coach that's been able to adapt so drastically and shimmy his offense to his personnel is Josh McDaniels over the years.
Yeah, Mike. What I know a couple weeks ago you had mentioned that the one team that seemed to have been game planning the best for Mahomes was the Chargers. I think it was. They able to hold him. I mean, to what, under 2 touchdowns, in each of the times that they faced him.
Yeah, they held his yardage down.
So my question is, talking about limiting a quarterback that seems to be impossible to game plan for. What have the Chargers been doing right? And I mean, it's talking about guys figuring out another team or figuring out a quarterback. What have the Chargers actually been doing?
I love Teddy's face right now, and I kind of feel like he wants to say something. So.
Yeah, is that an M&M Chips Ahoy, or what is that? I'm dying to know.
It's a Rainbow Chips Deluxe.
Oh, Chips Deluxe, of course.
Nice. Awesome.
You got the good treats.
Yeah. To your point, Connor, I think what the Chargers did right was they built their defense. Now we're just watching Matt
eat cookies. Oh my
It's an unboxing show. This is way better than football.
The Chargers defense is they have two. I mean, the Chargers defense, they took what the Indianapolis Colts did in the mid 2000s with Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis, and they just injected a bunch of steroids into it, where they have honestly the best secondary in the NFL. Now, it may have not performed like that last year. Derwin James was out, but their corners and their safeties are top notch. Derwin James comes back, right? They get Chris Harris Jr. from the Broncos, who is one of the most underrated corners in the entire NFL. Yeah. You pair him with Casey Hayward, Desmond King, and Derwin James. That secondary is phenomenal. What helps out a weak pass rush? A strong secondary. Well, what if you have a really great pass rush and a strong secondary? It's phenomenal. Where they struggled was at the linebacker position and the interior defensive line. So what do? They go out, they sign Linval Joseph and a phenomenal run-stuffing defensive tackle, and they go out and draft, in my belief, the best linebacker coming out of college in Kenneth Murray. So now they have an off-line of scrimmage linebacker who's going to play in the middle of the field, and they have a run-stuffing defensive tackle. Where is the hole on that defense? It's going to be so tough. Imagine putting Joey Bosa, who just got signed for a 5-year, $135 million contract. Imagine having Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa on the same side of the defensive formation, crashing down with Linval Joseph right next to both of them. It's impossible to cover that.
Well, I guess where I was coming from with that question, though, is I know you had implied or intimated that this could be we could have seen Lamar Jackson's peak, and defense is catching up to not only an offensive coordinator, but the quarterback, and being able to see more of a large sample size. So that's what I'm trying to say is like, will teams catch up? Can you catch up with Patrick Mahomes? San Diego seems to have had a formula to break it down a little
Angeles,
bit.
That's a lapse on both of us. This is still tough to get used to. But the Chargers, their defense is phenomenal, and if there's anyone that can beat Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes, it's the Chargers. The way that their defense is built on paper, obviously we don't know what the season is going to play out, but their defense is one of the most loaded defenses that I have seen probably since the Legion of Boom, maybe even before that.
So they're more of just like an anomaly. Like they are just unique in the sense that they're such a stacked defense versus like them just being able to game plan for Mahomes better.
The thing about the Chargers defense is that they have every part of the field covered. I don't see a weakness in their defense at all.
And Connor, as far as like game planning against a quarterback, the way I approach it is that like, and this is sort of where like I think you may have jumped in right during my vote for Mahomes is like I'm going to start a franchise, is that like I think it's a lot easier to win the chess match if you're a quarterback that can throw any pass, because like then all of a sudden you are looking at reads 3, 4, 5, and 6 and then run, and as opposed to 1, 2 and then I'm a great runner, let's go, because then like it's 3 less things that you might do on that. That's why like typically speaking like a running quarterback can be figured out quicker than a passing quarterback. That being said, I mean, Lamar Jackson is 23 years old, and like I like to think that I was still developing physically as a 23-year-old. Like I'm pretty sure that like I thought I was grown, but I was not. And I like, especially throwing, I do think that Lamar Jackson can evolve that. Like and I think that, they say like height can't be taught and speed can't be taught kind of thing. Like I think throwing the frozen rope can be taught. Like you'd need to do some like muscle development, but he's going to have the best trainers around him. Like he's got the intangibles to do so much that like he might be able to evade this like, we game plan for him, because like he spent this year, this offseason, the season, next offseason, while he's still like young enough to really evolve those traits. So like beat the competition. Like all of a sudden he does do something he didn't do last year. And I think that's what makes Lamar Jackson unique as compared to maybe some of the other quarterbacks we've seen that like kind of stagnate.
Okay.
Lamar Jackson might have an excellent year this year because of COVID. I mean, players might be out of shape. They're not used to contact. And Lamar Jackson would be running down their throats, and he's not he's not a power runner, obviously. But you need to have some, familiarity with physicality, at least in the first half of the year. Lamar Jackson could take advantage of that pretty easily.
Yeah, Matt, that is actually a fantastic point that you just brought up there, because oftentimes you see defenses struggle early in the year because these training camps have really become soft. They only allow a certain amount of padded practices and only allow a certain amount of full contact. That's why you see defenses struggle early in the year, unless you're someone like the fucking Patriots, who are just an anomaly in the first 8 weeks of the season. But this offseason, 20 days, no contact. And then you can only have 16 total padded practices. And you talk about thump, right? Thump them up. And that's different than being a full driving force and making a tackle. If teams are not practicing doing the right things, they're going to make mistakes. And that's actually a great point, and may actually change my stance on the whole Lamar Jackson thing, because defenses are not going to be ready to tackle him because they were not doing it, right? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. If you're not practicing like you play, what are you really doing?
Well, maybe they're not maybe they are practicing like they're going to play because they're not going to play at all.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
It's getting grim, guys. It's getting grim. I think I'm 51%. This season's never happening.
Wow.
That's high. That's high.
I mean,
They're doing basketball. They did soccer. They're doing baseball. I think 20-something players tested positive for COVID in the NFL coming in training camp. That's a small number. I think that,
and they're quarantined.
Yeah, I feel good about it now that they're here, and they're on the precipice of training camp.
People were throwing around today, receivers running routes. I thought that was a really good sign. You got to see Chase Young. He was doing some stuff with the Washington football team. And I know some Colts receivers were running routes. It's good to see football. And God damn it, I really hope that it stays around.
Yeah, I guess with everyone having the opportunity to opt out, maybe.
Yeah.
But still, it feels like testing and blah.
It's a scary situation to be in because I want so badly for this season to happen. I think we all do, because we kind of need it. We need it to kind of as an escape from our daily lives, and that's what the NFL and football, college football, has always been for us. It's an escape. It's a thing that brings a lot of people together. I mean, all of us, like, we've been in a fantasy football league together now for 15 plus years, the majority of us, and that's what brings us together every year. We talk about it. We're doing the show. We're doing everything like that. Football brings people together, and without that, it's just, there's a void, which is
also
unfortunate.
How has international soccer, like how has like the Premier League and the league in Italy, how have they been so successful at like keeping matches happening? Is it just because that the amount of, like, they knew that there was such a finite amount of the season like left, that they were like, all right, well, we can pretty much roll the dice on this, or at least keep people contained, and they were able to operate, I don't know, effectively that way? Or because I know football is supposed to be taking place during the time of the year where, I mean, it's not really conducive to keeping people healthy as far as like the COVID is concerned. So
I think two things. One is that Europe has done a better job containing the coronavirus than the U.S. That's just a fact, not political, just a fact.
Right.
The second thing is that they're contained in countries. They can get on a train or a bus and go to opposing stadiums, as opposed to the NFL and NBA. NBA is in a bubble now, but baseball has to go on planes, and so the travel is much greater. You're exposed to more people. You're bringing more people into that loop. Whereas I think and soccer, they play 3 games a week, every weekend, and then 1 game usually on Wednesday. So they have like an expedited schedule. So I think it was easier to pitch players on staying away from dangerous situations. Or situations where they might get COVID, because they had like this condensed season where they were playing often.
Okay.
Plus, I mean, players are pretty spaced out on that field. That field is huge.
I don't know, but it's soccer. They're running up against each other. There's no masks, there's no pads. They're up against each other. And if you watch any of the soccer highlights that are on YouTube, I know the English Premier League just ended. But if you watch any of those highlights, I mean, these guys are just playing like there's nothing going on. They're just right up against each other. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
A lot of kissing. It's weird.
So much kissing.
So much. So
I love it.
So a team that is definitely up against each other. Let's talk about the Browns real quick to kind of round out the show, because they're everyone's favorite team to just love and hype up. This is the Browns' year. This is it. They finally got it. Exactly. One thing about the Cleveland Browns is their offense, essentially, as far as personnel, has not changed from last year. Granted, they may get better play calling with Kevin Stefanski. They did get some help along the offensive line, drafting Jedrick Wills and bringing in Jack Conklin.
It's a huge help, by the way.
It is a huge help because their tackle play last year was abysmal. Ever since they lost Joe Thomas, they've really missed him. They bring in Austin Hooper at tight end, even though I honestly don't believe they needed him with David Njoku there, who is a pretty good talent. Still have Odell Beckham Jr., Jarvis Landry, who is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the NFL. So the Cleveland Browns are they're in a weird spot in the NFL because everyone's hyping them up so much, but I actually had a conversation with someone about the Jets in this regard. The Jets will always be the Jets, no matter the general manager, no matter the coach, no matter anything like that. They are who they are, and they're a shit franchise. The Cleveland Browns are in the same breath. They are the Cleveland Browns. No matter what coach you put in there, no matter what players you bring into the organization, they're still the fucking Cleveland Browns, and they're not going to amount to anything. And Mike, I honestly believe that.
It's so funny you bring that up because I watched every Browns game over the course of their entire franchise's history this week. And I even watched the Ravens just to be sure. No, but I watched some highlights of the games that they lost last year to try to get a sense of what was going on, because I saw some highlight tapes and they were doing like so many good things. They have so much talent on offense, and you look at them and like they're like Baker Mayfield's completing passes and Nick Chubb is running for 25 yards and Odell Beckham's making this crazy catch and Jarvis Landry, blah blah blah. And so it's like how does this team suck? And then you watch some of the highlights of their losses, and it's like, oh, it's the Browns. They're just finding Brownie ways to lose games. Penalties, like ridiculous turnovers in like the worst situations possible. So many games last year that they lost, and they were 6-10. So just a couple games going their way, they're in the playoffs. So many games, they're in complete control of the game, and then they just find like miraculous ways to lose it. So Freddie Kitchens going helps. In theory, you bring in Kevin Stefanski, who has never been a head coach. The only time that he was an offensive coordinator was he's been with the Vikings his entire career as a position coach, offensive coordinator last year, and the first as offensive coordinator. And the first thing he does as offensive coordinator, his big shot, he brings in Gary Kubiak, one of like the most like heavy-handed, like has his fingerprints all over a style of offense. And says like, let's just share it. And let's use your terminology, by the way. I don't want any ownership of this whatsoever. And it's not like the Vikings offense was that good. They were 23rd in total yards last year. It's not like Kirk Cousins was that good. They had a good running game, but like that offense wasn't like a world beating offense. So is Kevin Stefanski that big of a step up from Freddie Kitchens? I don't think so. What it comes down to is to me, Baker Mayfield. Because Nick Chubb is a dynamic player that just jumps off the tape. But when you watch when you watch Baker Mayfield, he can make the throws, but there's a shocking amount of times when he's completing passes, and Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry are just making like these ridiculous circus catches. Baker Mayfield is so inaccurate. 22 touchdowns, 21 interceptions last year, less than a 60% completion percentage. And he also does it at the worst possible time. He's a first quarter hero. So many times they went up 10-14 nothing. And then they just like the offense just completely stalled. And it's because Mayfield can't throw an accurate football. So that was alarming in his second year. Maybe that was a sophomore slump. And he comes back this year. Maybe if Kevin Stefanski borrows some of Gary Kubiak's offense and they run it all through Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, that takes some of the burden off of Baker Mayfield. But there's just so many question marks to have any kind of optimism about the Browns, especially given their history, as you alluded to, Mike.
Yeah, and I think that like what you're sort of saying, or like what Mike was saying anyway, and everything Matt was sort of a byproduct of this is like it's culture, and culture is really hard to change. And like we saw that firsthand. Like one of my favorite clips of Hard Knocks of all time was Jarvis Landry yelling at the wide receiver room, being like I don't care how hurt you are, you fucking practice. Like we're gonna get out there, like just like have the cart drive you out, and I'll throw you the ball and catch the ball. Like and it's about like having that winning attitude. And I think it does. You need a catalyst to change a culture, because like there will always be more people that were there last year than like new faces this year. So you can change the head coach who has a say, but like people might approach it with resentment. You can change the quarterback, you can change the GM, like whatever it is. But like these things take like years to evolve and like sort of sink in. But the one thing that you can do to change everything is put the MVP behind center. You know, like if you've got a quarterback that everyone subscribes to and you're like, this guy is making throws off the chart. If I am not playing at his level, then I am not doing my team like a service. And I think that's what happened with the Patriots, who are one of these teams that you could say 20 years ago, they're the Patriots. It doesn't even matter because like they're just a shitty franchise.
Right.
And then all of a sudden Tom Brady walks in and everyone's like, oh my God, like he hits every throw. And like he goes 110% every practice. And like Baker, I've seen him do lots of good things. And if he starts to like really exceed on the field or excel on the field, then like, I think there's a chance because like the talent is around him, but like that on the field, I think it can only happen from a quarterback. Like you might be able to get a defensive leader to elevate your defense, but that's still not going to be enough to change the culture in your building. Like once
wait, Teddy, you don't think that? So I actually thought, judging by like Hard Knocks and I mean just the entire, I mean decades upon decades of a sample size that you can just resort to like going through. I feel like the trend is actually, I don't want to say that the tide is kind of turning in a way. Like I disagreed with the moves of like just accruing receivers like Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. If you don't necessarily have the answer at quarterback, but I feel like the football decisions that they were making, the talent level that they have on the team has obviously gone up, trying to do something different. And I actually thought the GM was like kind of a decent influence as opposed to, I mean, Hugh Jackson, like getting rid of him after years and years. And also like the Bengals are another example of just like mediocrity and settling for it. And I think that getting Jackson out of that franchise, trying to clean house with the coaching staff and obviously Kitchens didn't work out. And that was, a bad football decision, but they let that, run its course fairly quickly. So I feel like they're trying to make better decisions now. And obviously, like you said, the culture doesn't change overnight or within one season. Obviously it's a lot easier if you have the superstar quarterback, which I don't think they have. I think the only problem that the Browns are having right now is because of all the talent they've brought in, they're overhyped. But I do feel like that franchise is actually moving in a direction that's, I mean, more or less positive or in the right direction as opposed to where they're coming from, which was absolute dog shit. I mean, people used to have jerseys where they would just change the name on the back of it for the quarterback that was going to change inevitably every fucking year. So, I mean, now they might have a little bit more stability. We regardless of what you want to say about Baker Mayfield, he's better than the shit that they've had behind center for
100%
2 decades. So I think that the Browns, while they are overhyped, I don't think they might not even be close to a playoff team. But I mean, 6 wins, 7 wins, God forbid 8 wins is leaps and bounds better than what you were looking at. So I can't say that I think that franchise is just dog shit, will always be dog shit, whatever. I actually think that the decisions they had been making were, as opposed to like a long-suffering Jets fan, I was kind of envious of what they had been trying to do as far as like make dynamic changes and just rebuild completely, as opposed to just I don't know, it seemed like lateral moves and terrible coaching decision after terrible, and the Jets just being, I don't know, a little bit more like hands off in their approach. So I am more positive or more high on that.
To be clear, I'm a Browns apologist. I like them. I like the moves they've made, and they went from 1-31 over 2 years to go 8-7-1, and then I guess 6-10, which is a little bit of a disappointment. But like, all I'm trying to say is that like they went from complete horseshit. This is an organization that like never goes anywhere to like making actual strides, but like it takes time. It takes
definitely
and special people in addition.
I think they're
like,
suffering from their own hype right now. That's what my point is, that they're suffering from the fact that they've brought in huge names, but that kind of detracts from the other talent they have within the franchise and the other decisions that they're trying to make to give that team more stability, more talent that like will last, as opposed to just having high profile wide receivers.
Yeah. Teddy, I am banging on your fucking drum right now because you hit it on the head a couple minutes ago with fucking culture, because that's what the Browns organization needs. And to your point, they hit the nail on the head with fucking Jarvis Landry.
Oh,
what he was doing during Hard Knocks, my blood was pumping. I was just like, yo, I want to go fight for this fucking guy, right? But he had Hugh Jackson there as the boss.
Right.
And
then those clips too, right? You saw it. He's just like,
yeah, bless him, or whatever it was that he was saying. Like, that reminded me kind of like Ocho Cinco with like Kiss the Baby and like shit like that. People fucking respected Ocho Cinco, Chad Johnson, for whatever it was. People were getting on board with Jarvis Landry when you have this fucking pussyfoot of a head coach and Hugh Jackson, God rest his soul, because he's never going to get a head coaching job ever again. And where this culture starts from, it's not the head coach. It's not the players. It's the fucking ownership, because they keep making terrible fucking decisions. And I'm tired of this with the fucking, I'm not even a Browns fan. I could give a shit, but they keep making these terrible fucking decisions. They decide to hire Freddie Kitchens when they should have hired Greg Williams as their head coach, because he took over as the interim head coaching job, and he did a phenomenal job with that team. That defense, Greg Williams, say what you will about the guy, his defenses are always phenomenal, and he doesn't need big name players to produce on the field. Instead, you hire a guy like Freddie Kitchens. Now, going into 2020, you drop the ball by hiring no head coaches, none of the top head coaches that were out there. You take a 1-year offensive coordinator, make him your head coach of your entire organization, where you have all these big name fucking personalities, and you just continually make bad decisions. Not saying Kevin Stefanski can't be the guy, but I don't believe he is. And one thing that ruined the Browns organization also is you have your leader on that offense in Jarvis Landry, as we just talked about. And what do? You bring in a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. Now all the young guys on the team, do you think they're listening to Jarvis? No, they're fucking listening to that idiot Odell Beckham Jr. and all his crybaby nonsense and everything like that. So you have just completely devalued everything that Jarvis Landry has built and put in place for those younger players on the team, and just thrown it completely out the window by getting a guy like that, because no one's going to listen to Jarvis now, no matter how much he talks. Sorry, I got a little animated there.
Touche. Woo!
What happened? What happened? I blacked out.
Yeah. Dude, we had 1 million viewers.
Awesome. It only says 2 right now, but I'll take it.
2 million, wow.
Yeah, 2 million. Yeah. But I mean, honestly though, the Browns, and it stems from the top down. Matt, you brought up last week about, not to just harp on the Falcons, but Arthur Blank. He is a fantastic owner, and he does a lot, not only for the community, for his team and his players. Players respect him. People around the league respect him. And you look at some of the other owners around the league, like there's only a handful of these guys that actually own really good organizations. It's Cleveland. They continually do not do the right thing. They had a chance to get Marvin Lewis. Marvin Lewis should have been the head coach. I would have taken him over Kevin Stefanski, because you know what he is? He's a disciplinarian. And I think he controls the team. Kevin Stefanski, to your point, had never controlled an entire team before, Matt. Yeah. He is a 1-year offensive coordinator, and he rode the coattails of Gary Kubiak the entire season, and didn't even have that good of a season.
Yeah, I think it could be a disaster unless, we just don't know. We just don't know what Stefanski's offensive mindset is. He the only time he had an opportunity to call plays or run an offense, he brought in Gary Kubiak. So we can maybe assume that, or maybe not. Who knows?
Matt, who are you higher on, Andy Dalton or what is this? Baker Mayfield? In their prime, I guess, if we could say Baker Mayfield has a prime right now. Who would you ride with?
Well, I guess like if we consider Baker Mayfield's if we take an aggregate of Baker Mayfield's last 2 years, right, like the good and the bad, and then we take like the best Andy Dalton when they were 13-3 and going into the playoffs. Andy Dalton was like a really excellent game manager, whereas Baker Mayfield is kind of a scattershot gunslinger. And in that situation, if you put Andy Dalton in the Browns system, that team is a whole lot better than with Baker Mayfield. I think if you even put Andy Dalton in right now, not even in his prime, if you put Andy Dalton in right now and he's throwing to Landry and Beckham and Hooper and Njoku and has those 2 running backs, I think that team is a whole lot better. And that defense, by the way, is pretty good.
You had, well, I mean, if you were thinking about some weapons that Andy Dalton's had as far as like AJ Green in the past, I guess, or Chad Ochocinco, I probably would roll the dice with a no name as opposed to going with Marvin Lewis though. I just don't care. Like, I mean, at least you can say like if it doesn't work out within 1 or 2 years, you just move on. But I feel like I've seen enough from Marvin Lewis.
But
and,
that's the thing. The Browns have never had, and you alluded to this with their quarterbacks. They just buy a jersey and tape the quarterbacks' names. Organizations need stability, right? The Pittsburgh Steelers could have fired Mike Tomlin after a couple seasons, but they have stability. He won a Super Bowl. He had a couple of shitty seasons in between, but they stick with him because the organization needs stability. The players respect him. Up until this recent year, let's talk about 2 teams in the NFC South. Sean Payton had 3 consecutive 7-9 seasons. Then he won a Super Bowl. Dan Quinn, just coming off of 2 7-9 seasons. The players rally around these guys because they're good coaches. And it's stability within the organization. Same systems, same lingo, everything like that, right? Because all these coaches bring in a different type of atmosphere. Like, here's what we're going to do. These are the type of points that we're going to attack. Marvin Lewis brings stability because he's been in the position for a very long time. He was head coach of the Bengals for, 16 years? I don't even know. And
yeah, but the Browns also brought in Mike Holmgren for a spell, and that was also disastrous, which I just think speaks to a larger issue that the Browns are just a historically poorly run franchise. Them and the Lions are the 2 worst owned or managed franchise in the league. I mean, even the Jets, even with their shitty owner, Woody Johnson, who's in his own trouble now because there's something where he was trying to and he's an ambassador to Scotland. He was trying to get the Scottish Prime Minister to give the British Open to Trump's golf course, which is fucking insane. And very Woody Johnson. But anyway, the Jets still went to 2 AFC Championship games. They still hired Rex Ryan. The Jets haven't been as terrible as either the Lions or the Browns over the last 2 decades. And maybe that's because it's New York, the pressure is higher, and Woody Johnson maybe a little bit more standoffish than the Lions or Browns ownership. I don't know. But the larger point is that the Browns, I don't know, short of selling the team to new ownership, what is the solution for this franchise that hasn't made the playoffs? I think it's the longest drought for them, right? It's like 18 years or something.
So. Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers.
It's Aaron Rodgers.
Wow.
As head coach.
With Tom Brady as quarterback.
First player coach in how many decades from the NFL?
I mean, it's just remarkable for the Browns organization to have so much talent and not be able to do anything with it. I'm surprised they have as much space in the salary cap as they do with all of these players that they have signed there.
Just imagine if the Browns, with all that talent, had drafted Lamar Jackson. That's a totally different team. That's a team that's 14-2. But they didn't make that choice. And by the way, neither did any of the other teams: the Bills, the Cardinals, the Broncos, and any of the teams that were drafting a quarterback here. All passed on Lamar Jackson. But when you stack it up against the history of the Browns, they could have had Frank Reich as a coach. They could have had Doug Peterson as a coach. They could have brought in Eric Bieniemy from Kansas City as their coach. They could have had Matt LaFleur. They could have had Sean McVay. They could have had Kyle Shanahan, in theory, right? They could have brought in all those guys.
They did have Kyle Shanahan.
Well, yeah, there you go. And for some reason, on that staff didn't work out. So that just speaks to the larger organizational issues for the Browns.
I don't think the Browns will ever amount to anything. And what's one of the cardinal rules of football? What one of the first things that coaches
Panky's down.
You win in the trenches.
Panky's down. Speaking in team terms, you win your division. So as the Cleveland Browns with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens going neck and neck, Big Ben's back this year, so they're pretty even. The Browns fucking winning that division? No way. No way in hell.
I'm putting a bet in tomorrow. Browns win.
Lock it up. Well, Connor, we know you're a big gambler.
Big Ben goes down, Steelers out. And then who else do I have to worry about? Oh, Lamar Jackson 100%. Comes back to earth in a big way. They figure him out.
Oh, no, you guys haven't seen Mason Rudolph yet. He is fantastic.
He's still concussed from Myles Garrett. Let's be honest. He's got permanent brain trauma from that hit.
I feel better about the Bengals than I do about the Browns, and that says a lot.
Absolutely. We talked about their offense a couple weeks ago. Yeah. I mean, those receivers, that Cincinnati Bengals offense could very well look like, LSU did last year. They have 4 very good starting receivers who they're not all the same guy. Each one of them does something like specific. Yeah. John Ross is your speed guy, your down the field guy. AJ Green is your kind of all around possession red zone target. T Higgins is kind of your intermediate route guy, and then you got Tyler Boyd, who's really kind of more of your possession wide receiver. And now you add into the mix Joe Mixon, who by the way has never fumbled on a rushing attempt since he came into the NFL. Like, I thought it was just last year, but I did some more research into him. Has never fumbled on a rushing attempt in the NFL. And also, let's not forget about Giovanni Bernard, who can easily fill that Clyde Edwards-Helaire role in LSU. Granted, it's not the same offense. Joe Brady is not in Cincinnati, but they could take things from that offense and implement it in their system. Giovanni Bernard, very fast, very excellent route runner and pass catcher. As a change of pace back to Joe Mixon, who's kind of more of your thumper in between the tackles, that offense, wow. I'm excited to watch the Cincinnati Bengals. And I remember when the schedule got released and we were kind of just like, wow, Cincinnati got all these primetime games. Like, they were a shit team last year. I want to watch Joe Burrow. I want to watch that offense. I want to see what happens.
No doubt.
All right. Connor, why don't you take us out here? Because I think we've covered enough ground here tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for my tardiness this evening, but I am so glad I got to join the gentlemen and the listeners, viewers once again this week. Like, share, subscribe. This is the college hoop. No, I'm just kidding. This is the fantasy football's finest. And Mike, did we do any changes to like where people can find us or anything like that, or is it still?
We're still on Facebook, still on Instagram. Okay. FF Finest 365. You can find us there, and obviously here on YouTube. So,
right on. All right, guys. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Oh, don't want to do that in the live stream.